and welcome to today's episode of Piano TV. I'm Allysia, your host, and today what we're going to do is take a tour through Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor. I believe it's Opus 18. What we're going to do with this video is we're going to listen through some examples of the movement. We're going to talk about key points, and I'll just give you some musical tidbits along the way. Now, if you're not a particularly musical person, this video should still, for the most part, make sense to you and hopefully give you a greater understanding of this rather large 40-minute long concerto. I like to do analysis style videos on this channel, and I've done a whole bunch of other ones, including Bach's Goldberg variations. We've done all of Chopin's 24 preludes, Debussy's Clair de Lune, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and more. So be sure to check those out if you haven't already. So let's get started. Backstory time. Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 2 premiered in 1901 when he was just 28 years old. It's one of his most famous piano compositions, and it was actually his comeback composition after a disastrous first symphony that didn't go over very well. He spent years between that symphony and this concerto being depressed and not feeling very creative. But luckily he had a really good therapist, Nikolai Dahl, who helped him through his issues so that he was able to find his creativity again and produce this concerto. Rachmaninoff dedicated this concerto to Nikolai Dahl, his shrink. So that's nice. This concerto has a very Russian flavor to it, and it definitely has strong echoes of Rachmaninoff's hero, Tchaikovsky. We've talked about concertos on this channel before, so if you haven't checked that out, do check it out because it'll go into a lot more detail. But the short of it is that a concerto is a multi-movement work, usually a large one, that is very difficult. It's kind of like it puts the spotlight on one instrument, and that one instrument is given the opportunity to go wild and show off. So in the case of a piano concerto like this one, the piano part is going to be very virtuosic and challenging to play. But a concerto isn't just one instrument, it's one featured instrument against the backdrop of an orchestra of varying sizes. When this premiered, Rachmaninoff himself played the piano part, and his cousin was the conductor. This concerto has 3 movements. Number 1, Moderato. Number 2, Adagio sostenuto più animato. And number 3, Allegro scherzando. A full performance of all 3 movements is about 40 minutes long. But in order to keep this video a reasonable length, what we're going to do is just point out a few key things to listen to, but we won't be able to go into epic depth, so I encourage you to listen to the full version. The piano opens with a famous and dramatic chordal pattern that resembles bells tolling. After that, the orchestra kicks in and the melody is played in the orchestra while the piano melts into a series of arpeggios over here. As is typical of concertos, the first movement is in sonata form. I've done a whole video on that if you don't know what that means. It's basically a really detailed long form. Boiled down to its essence, it has 3 parts: the exposition, development, and recapitulation. The exposition is where the main themes are introduced and everything is stated. The development takes those main themes and twists them around and manipulates them, changing keys. It's usually really tense. And then the recapitulation is basically going back to the beginning, usually with some minor variations. It's kind of like a glorified ABA form, where the exposition and recapitulation are pretty similar, and then the development is a different section. Let's take a listen to the chordal introduction and opening theme of the exposition to get a feel for the flavor of this piece. The first theme is quite extended and takes us through the first 2.5 minutes or so of the piece. Then the second theme emerges in the piano, much brighter and more optimistic than the opening, because it's in the parallel major key of C minor, which is E flat major. Let's now jump into the second section of the first movement, which is the development section. After this big dramatic build in the exposition, ending in the key of E flat major with the full orchestra, we come back to some tension and angst, which is pretty common in development sections. Here we see pieces from both the first and the second theme, and they're getting a little bit manipulated and moved around a little bit. So at the start of the development, you'll hear the first theme, but this time it's going to be with different harmonies, which creates a more unsettled feeling. After some twists and turns, we build up to the climactic moment of this movement, with the piano literally climbing higher and higher in a series of dissonant chords, while the full orchestra adds some pomp and bombast. The recapitulation, or return, isn't a direct copy of the beginning exposition. Instead, the piano's playing a march-like theme, while the orchestra is providing us some musical continuity. That's what you're going to hear in the example in a moment, which is going to be followed by the second theme and then the closing bit, which ends in a C minor fortissimo. We're not going to listen to all of that, but we will listen to just a little bit of the recapitulation so you can hear that a la Marcia. The second movement is very emotive and sentimental, and a little bit slow. That's what our adagio sostenuto is telling us. At the beginning of our second movement, the strings give us some C minor chords that help us transition to our new key of E major, which is an unrelated key, so it's an interesting transition. And the remainder of the movement is going to be in E major. This movement is about 10 minutes long, and it's in simple ABA format. Let's listen to a little bit from the beginning. After the piano arpeggios, the flute solo joins as our main theme. It's just a really slow and beautiful melody, and this melody is then later taken over by the clarinets, which we won't listen to, but let's take a quick listen to the flute. The B section concludes with a very virtuosic piano part, which provides us the climactic moment of the movement. Since this is the pinnacle, I feel like it's worth just taking a quick listen to here. This part, which we're not going to listen to after, is followed by a piano cadenza, which is like a really fancy, fast little thing. And then it returns to the A section and original theme with the music dying away, all in the key of E major. The third and final movement, Allegro scherzando, is about 12 minutes long. And again, it's obviously way too detailed for us to get really deep into this analysis, but we can do some broad strokes here. Just like with the first movement, the third movement is in sonata form. And just like the quick modulation from C minor to E major in the second movement, the third movement is reverse. We start with a modulation that goes from E major and then takes us back to our home key of C minor. Our first theme in the exposition is heard in the piano, and it's really stormy and really agitated. And let's take a quick listen to the beginning of this movement so you can hear that transition from E major to C minor, from playful to stormy. After a brief little piano bridge, the second theme is introduced with the oboe. I want to show you this theme because it's lovely, simple, lyrical. I really feel like it shows Rachmaninoff's skill with a melody. The development section is very long and very lively, largely centered around the first theme. The recapitulation, which is the return, sees a triumphant ending to the concerto, and our coda is in C major, and C major is very, very bright key, and there is a full orchestra playing lively staccatos. It's ecstatic, and unsurprisingly, it's incredibly difficult on the piano. So let's take a quick listen to the very end. And that is all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this tour through Rachmaninoff's very, very famous Piano Concerto No. 2. Actually, if you followed the video I did a few weeks ago on Classic.fm's top piano picks, this one was number 2. So this one is basically considered like a global favorite among the people. This is a really well-known and well-loved composition. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and check me out on social and Patreon. I'll see you next time. Backstory time. Rachmaninoff's... After the piano arpeggios, the flute... Whoa, what just happened there?